A journey written in blood, memory, and salt. The Atlantic Ocean carries many secrets, but none more haunting than the paths taken by millions of enslaved Africans torn from their homelands. Yet in the 19th century, a quiet but powerful reversal began. Ships that once sailed from West Africa to Brazil now traced their routes backward. Not as vessels of destruction, but as vessels of return. Men and women who had tasted slavery, survived it, and earned or fought for their freedom decided to take an unimaginable step, to return home to Yoruba land, to Lagos, Abeokuta, Ibadan, and the ancient towns whispered to them in childhood stories that survived plantation fields. They were known by many names: Agudas, Amaros, Tabam, Nego, Brazilian returnees, but history remembers them most simply as the Africans who came back. And their return would reshape Lagos permanently. Before we dive into the main story, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell notification button for more interesting videos like this. Throughout the 1700s and early 1800s, Brazil received more enslaved Africans than anywhere else in the Americas. Nearly 5 million Africans were taken there, and a significant number were Yoruba, captured during the Oyo civil wars and regional conflicts. Their language, songs, and Orisa worship survived in Bahia, Salvador, and Recife with a tenacity the slave masters could never kill. In the narrow alleys of Salvador de Bahia, Yoruba chants echoed in the night. Orisa mi o, emofe padasile. My divinity, I want to return home. Even those who no longer remembered the exact name of their village remembered one thing. Home was across the ocean. So when slavery was gradually softened, reshaped, or abolished, and when manumission became possible, thousands of African Brazilians made a decision the world was not prepared for. They would go back, not to the plantations, not to the cities of Brazil, but to the very land from which their ancestors had been taken. 1840s, 1880s, the migration begins. Independent ship owners, traders, and former slaves organized voyages from Brazil to West Africa. Some sailed from Bahia, others from Rio de Janeiro. Many had saved money for decades, working as carpenters, smiths, tailors, masons, skills they would soon use to remake Lagos. When the returnees first reached the coast, they often asked the same question. Where is the land of the Yoruba? Local traders pointed eastward, toward the lagoon city that was rapidly becoming the commercial heartbeat of the region, Lagos. And so the return began. When the African Brazilians reached Lagos, they did something astonishing. They didn't settle quietly. They transformed the city. Their influence can still be seen today. They introduced Brazilian-style stucco houses, ornate balconies, arched verandas, and multi-story structures. These homes, some still standing in areas like Brazilian Quarters, Popo Aguda, and Campos Square, became symbols of a cosmopolitan Lagos. Many returnees were Catholics converted in Brazil. They built the landmark Holy Cross Cathedral, blending Afro-Brazilian aesthetics with European forms. Yet they did not forget their roots. Some maintained secret Orisa traditions, contributing to the religious richness of Lagos and reinforcing the survival of Yoruba spirituality abroad. African Brazilians were skilled artisans who brought advanced carpentry, masonry, tailoring, goldsmithing, boat building, cooking traditions rooted in both Africa and Brazil. Their craftsmanship elevated Lagos architecture and trade to new heights. The returnees strengthened Lagos as a commercial powerhouse. Some became wealthy merchants, establishing businesses that linked Lagos with Bahia, Cuba, and Sierra Leone. One Lagos historian described the era as the moment the city opened its arms to its prodigal children, and they came bearing gifts. African Brazilians blended their heritage with Yoruba culture in unique ways. They spoke Yoruba mixed with Portuguese influences. Words like Aguda, from Aguda equals Catholic returnees, became common in Lagos vocabulary. Dishes such as Frajan, bean and coconut soup, Dobradina, Feijoada-inspired meals, became part of Lagos cuisine during festive seasons. Brazilian lace, colorful turbans, and unique garment styles reshaped the fashion landscape of Lagos, particularly among elite families. To this day, Lagos boasts Brazilian-influenced surnames: Da Silva, De Souza, Ferreira, Martins, Pereira, Cardoso, Moreira. These names serve as living memories of a diaspora that returned home. As much as Lagos embraced the returnees, the process was not without tensions. The Agudas were caught between worlds. Were they Brazilian? Were they Yoruba? Were they both? Local Lagosians sometimes viewed them as foreigners, while the returnees insisted they were simply coming home. Their new skills placed them in powerful economic positions. This caused friction with established guilds and indigenous artisans. The British, who increasingly expanded their influence in Lagos, sometimes used the Agudas as intermediaries, creating further political tensions. Yet despite these challenges, the African-Brazilian community persisted. Their resilience was a legacy of both slavery and survival. The returnees did not stop in Lagos alone. They spread across West Africa. In Ghana, they became the Tabam people of Accra. In Benin, many returned to Ouidah and Porto Novo. In Togo, they blended with Aya and Yoruba communities. In Sierra Leone, some joined other liberated Africans in Freetown. Everywhere they settled, they contributed. Architecture, craftsmanship, religion, music, urban planning, trade networks. Their legacy shaped entire regions. One historian wrote, "They returned with nothing but memory, yet they built cities." It is impossible to understand the African-Brazilian return without acknowledging the deep emotional dimension. Many returnees visited shrines, rivers, and sacred groves. They sought to reconnect with ancestors stolen generations before. Some, upon touching Lagos soil, reportedly knelt and cried, "We have come home again." For others, returning was not just physical, it was spiritual healing. Walk through Lagos Island today and you will still see stuccoed Brazilian houses, the famous Aguda quarters, family names with Portuguese origins, festivals influenced by Afro-Brazilian Catholic traditions, descendants who proudly identify as Brazilian Yoruba. Their legacy is not fading, it is growing. Modern Afro-Brazilians, scholars, and cultural tourists frequently visit Lagos in search of heritage, just as their ancestors did over 150 years ago. The circle continues. Yet there is still an untold chapter. In a forgotten archive in Brazil and scattered in old Lagos family chests, historians believe there are still hundreds of journals, letters, and documents written by the returnees themselves. Stories of the journey. Names of original Yoruba villages lost to history. Memories of resistance in Brazil and secret accounts of their first days back in Lagos. Some say these documents hold answers that could rewrite the narrative of the Atlantic slave trade, answers that may reveal who the earliest returnees truly were, which Yoruba towns they originally came from, and how many more descendants across Brazil may still be connected to Lagos. But the documents remain missing. In 2019, during the renovation of an old house in the Brazilian quarters of Lagos, workers stumbled upon a rusted iron box buried beneath cracked, century-old floorboards. Inside lay a bundle of papers, ink faded, edges brittle, Portuguese words barely legible. One sentence stood out. Se algum dia eu morrer, diga eles que volti para minha terra, para Alife. If I die someday, tell them I return to my land, to Alife. It was signed, Domingos José da Silva, 1858. It was not simply a letter. It was the first clue in a trail historians had been searching for over 150 years. The trail of the lost documents of the returnees. When African Brazilians sailed back across the Atlantic in the 1800s, many carried leather trunks filled with baptism records, manumission papers, family names, sketches of Yoruba villages, trade receipts, ship logs, handwritten diaries, and coded notes about their capture. Local Yoruba chiefs called them apidi iranti, boxes of memory. But during the wars, fires, and colonial occupations between 1860 and 1910, many trunks disappeared. Others were hidden for protection. Some were taken by colonial administrators. A few were carried far into the interior by families who feared confiscation. Out of hundreds of trunks, only a handful have ever been recovered. What stories remain locked away in the missing ones? Some Lagos families still whisper stories of Afro-Brazilian ancestors, stories kept secret to avoid colonial retaliation. 1. The Pereira clan. According to oral tradition, the Pereiras owned a diary written by a matriarch who survived a slave revolt in Bahia. The diary supposedly describes a mysterious Yoruba priest she met aboard a ship, one who predicted she would return to the land of Ogun. The diary has never been found. 2. The Cardoso children. In the 1870s, a set of twins, Adenike and Mariana Cardoso, were said to have drawn a map of their grandfather's original village in Oyo homeland. The map vanished shortly after the British bombardment of Lagos in 1851. A surviving cousin claimed the map showed a trail that modern historians have never been able to verify. 3. The de Souza ledger. The de Souza family of Lagos, not to be confused with the de Souza dynasty of Dahomey, reportedly maintained a secret ledger, recording the names of returnees, their ships, birthplaces, and Brazilian plantation identifiers if it exists. The ledger could reconnect thousands of Afro-Brazilians today to exact Yoruba towns their ancestors came from. But no researcher has ever seen it. Historians agree that at least 50 to 60 ships carried Afro-Brazilians back to Lagos, Porto Novo, Accra, and other ports. But the complete list of ships is missing. Only fragments remain. The Soberana, logged in Bahia, 1847. The Flor de Bahia, appeared in a Lagos harbor report, 1853. The Maria Quiteria, rumored to have carried freed Yoruba priests. A strange ship name appears in multiple oral traditions but in no official record. O Navio de Saudade, the ship of longing. Some say it carried the first returnees directly to Ile-Ife, not Lagos. Others believe it never existed, that it was a metaphor for the spiritual journey home. Yet recently, a researcher in Salvador found a torn sailor's journal referencing a ship chartered by freed Nego people that refused to give its true name. Why hide the name? Were its passengers fleeing persecution? Was it carrying sacred objects? Or was it involved in acts the authorities were not meant to know? The mystery deepens. Today, descendants across Brazil, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and Ghana are reclaiming their story. Yoruba-descended Brazilians in Salvador and Sao Paulo are increasingly uncovering genetic links to Lagos Island, Abeokuta, Oyo, Ijebu, Madakik, Osogbo. Some discover relatives still alive in Nigeria, families separated for 200 years. Many Afro-Brazilians had Yoruba middle names that were erased during slavery. Adesina, Oladipupo, Ogunwale, Sangomeji, Omobii. Today, researchers and families are restoring these names through archives and oral histories. In Lagos, descendants host annual gatherings in Popo Aguda, dancing to Brazilian samba rhythms mixed with Yoruba bata and talking drum beats. A sound that should have been impossible, yet echoes as if it had never been separated. Lagos historians now collaborate with archivists in Salvador de Bahia and Rio, scanning old church documents, ship logs, and colonial reports. Every year, new clues appear. A forgotten baptism record. A mislabeled ship manifest. A coded letter referencing Yoruba towns like Irisa Adu, Akinmorin, and Ife-Odin. The past is awakening. Among Lagos elders, one name is whispered like a legend. Alhaji Joao Baba Joao Martins, the keeper. A descendant of returnees, Baba Joao was said to possess an original list of passengers from a returned ship. A diary from 1852. A map drawn by a Yoruba priest in Brazil. And letters written in both Yoruba and Portuguese. He protected them fiercely, saying, "When time is ripe, the ancestors will show whose hands must hold this history." But when he died in 1978, the trunk containing his documents disappeared from his home in Campos Square. Some say British agents took it decades earlier. Others believe a Lagos family still guards it, fearing foreign exploitation. A rumor persists that the trunk was last seen in a house that no longer exists, demolished during urban redevelopment. Or so it seemed. Last year, historians analyzed an old photograph taken in 1912 in Popo Aguda. In the background, partially obscured behind a girl holding a lace umbrella, is an object. A wooden chest, carved with Para os nossos filhos, 1854 for our children, 1854. The same inscription described on Baba Joao's trunk. But the photograph reveals something else, something shocking. A symbol carved beneath the inscription. The sacred Opa-Iranian mark, a mark not commonly known in Brazil. How did the returnees know this symbol? Was there a priest among them who preserved hidden knowledge? Did they carry spiritual artifacts forbidden to slaves in Brazil? This single photograph raises questions that rewrite everything we thought we knew. 3 months ago, in a small church archive in Salvador, a librarian uncovered a bundle of uncatalogued documents wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a letter dated 1851, written in beautiful Portuguese script. We return not as strangers, but as children of Oduduwa. Tell my family in Lagos that I carry the map. The writer's name, Ana Vitória de Souza, Nego. Enclosed with the letter was a torn piece of parchment, a drawing of a coastline with rivers branching inland. Coordinates written in the margin matched an area near modern-day Lagos. But the last line chilled the researchers. Hide this letter. The others are already searching for the trunk. Who are the others? Colonial officers? Slave traders angry at the return movement? Or rival families seeking political advantage? The truth lies somewhere in the missing trunks. Historians say some stories end with certainty. This one does not. This one ends with awakening. For nearly 2 centuries, the mystery of the Brazilian returnees' missing documents lingered like an unfinished song, its final notes scattered across continents. Letters in Salvador. Ledgers in Lagos. Hints buried in family altars. Fragments resting in dusty chests that nobody dared open. But every journey must have a point where the past finally rises to meet the present. This is that point. The discovery of Ana Vitória de Souza's 1851 letter sent shockwaves through the small circle of historians working on the African-Brazilian Yoruba connection. Her mention of a map, and her warning that others are already searching, reignited a hunt that had been silent for decades. A team was formed, a combined effort between Lagos state historians, Salvador de Bahia archivists, Brazilian descendants of returnees, and one quiet Yoruba priest from Ife whose presence nobody could fully explain. Together, they followed the trail. They mapped the last known locations of trunks belonging to the Pereiras, Cardosos, de Souzas, Martins, and Amaros. One pattern emerged: each trunk was associated with families who possessed unusual knowledge, historical, spiritual, or political. They were not just keeping documents. They were keeping secrets. As the research team dug deeper, they uncovered a suppressed report written by a British officer in Lagos in 1863. The report had never been officially released. It exposed a hidden political conflict. The returnees were not merely immigrants. They were influencers, educated, multilingual, skilled, and globally connected. Their increasing influence threatened both British colonial ambitions and local Lagos chiefs who feared losing power. The report revealed an astonishing truth. Certain British officers and local collaborators deliberately seized or destroyed returnee documents because the records proved powerful lineages and land claims that could challenge colonial rule. Families who resisted had their houses raided. Some trunks were confiscated under the pretext of tax checks, missionary investigations, or maintaining public order. The trunks were never returned. A chilling line appeared in the report. Some families hold documents linking them to royal houses in the interior, these must not fall into their hands again. This meant something historians had long suspected, but never confirmed. Some Afro-Brazilian returnees were direct descendants of Yoruba nobility. And the trunks held proof. While the political dimension was shocking, the spiritual layer was even more intriguing. In the recovered objects and letters, one symbol appeared repeatedly. The Opa-Oramian mark, two crossed lines meeting a vertical pillar. But why? Why would returnees in Brazil know a symbol associated with Oramian, the legendary prince of Ife and founder of Oyo? The Ife priest traveling with the research team finally spoke. The symbol means return to rightful origin. Oramian was a warrior who traveled far and returned home to build dynasties. Those who marked their trunks with his sign believed their journey mirrored his path. But there was something deeper. He revealed that certain Afro-Brazilian priests in Bahia maintained a secret order during slavery, dedicated to preserving Yoruba royal knowledge. The order kept maps, songs, genealogies, and stories forbidden on the plantations. These priests believed that one day descendants would physically return to Yoruba land and revive forgotten ties. The trunks, he said, were their portable shrines of memory. The new generation of descendants, living in Brazil, Nigeria, the US, Cuba, and Portugal, began uncovering truths their ancestors never had the chance to reclaim. DNA links across the Atlantic. Families in Salvador discovered genetic matches in Oyo. Descendants in Sao Paulo matched with families in Abeokuta. A young man in Bahia found he was related to a line of Lagos chiefs. The Atlantic was no longer a barrier, it had become a bridge. Documents found in Salvador churches restored Yoruba names buried for centuries. Omalade, Afalabi, Sangool, Fadik, Olarunfimi. These names now appear again in Brazilian birth registries, resurrected like ancestors answering a long silent call. One Lagos family received a video call from Brazil, a 78-year-old Bahian woman speaking Yoruba she learned from her great-grandmother. She said, "Moti Podasile. I have returned home." Even through a screen, the ocean felt smaller. The search culminated in an abandoned storage room beneath an old colonial-era church in Lagos Island. The room was locked for decades. Inside were rusted candlesticks, worn books, and a wooden chest almost identical to the one in the 1912 photograph. The inscription read, "Para os nossos filhos, 1854 for our children, 1854. The research team opened it carefully. Inside were 1. Passenger lists. Names of men, women, and children who sailed from Bahia back to Lagos. Many matched surnames still found in Popoaguta today. 2. Maps and village sketches. Hand-drawn diagrams of Yoruba towns, with Portuguese annotations. One map was marked with the Oramian symbol and coordinates that matched the region around ancient Ife. 3. A secret diary. Written by an Afro-Brazilian priest describing rituals performed quietly on the ship, rituals asking the ancestors to guide them back to their true lineage. 4. A royal seal. A bronze seal bearing the emblem of a noble Oyo family, proof that at least one returnee belonged to a royal lineage. 5. A final letter. Addressed to the children yet unborn. It read, "If you find this trunk, know that the ocean did not break us. Know that we remembered who we were. And you must continue the circle." With the discovery of the trunk, the story of the African-Brazilian Yoruba returners reached its final chapter, but not its end. Lagos scholars digitized the contents. Brazilian descendants held ceremonies to honor their ancestors. A delegation from Ife traveled to Bahia to reconnect with the lineage that had survived 200 years of separation. In both continents, drums sounded, Bata in Lagos, Atabak in Bahia. The rhythms met again across the ocean, not as echoes of loss, but as celebrations of return. For the first time in centuries, the children of Oramian, scattered by force, reunited by memory, found their way back home. And the Atlantic, which once carried suffering, now carried stories, names, and bloodlines finally restored. The end, and the beginning of rediscovery. Want more stories like this? Hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our story because this. It's just getting started.